Welcome into another edition of the Charm City Birdwatch podcast. I'm your host, Jake McDonnell, recapping just the Ravens' 20-7-10 win over the Browns. Big win yesterday for the Ravens, advancing to 8-6. Here to break it all down with me is Vasilios Nikolaou, who has been writing for Charm City Birdwatch all season long. We haven't had the chance to have him on the podcast yet, but he's been a huge help with getting up all of our previews and recaps for some of the games. Joining us today on the podcast, you can follow him on Twitter at the NFL Guy as well, not only here on Charm City Birdwatch, but the Legacy Maker Sports Network as well. This is a guy I met over the summer at WBAL as one of my fellow interns. He is still interning there, and he actually is going to have a big opportunity this weekend to go down to the Ravens game, which we'll get more into as we go along. For me, you could follow me on Twitter at jmcdonald95, as well as Charm City BW and CharmCityBirdwatch.com, as well as Facebook, Instagram, and we also are coming to you crystal clear through SoundCloud or iTunes. Another thing I wanted to bring up is I've been starting to do some quick 3-minute videos about the Ravens, and I'm going to be doing them about the Orioles and other topics as well. Had a video last night, three game balls for the Ravens 27-10 win over the Browns. You can check that out on YouTube, as well as it's embedded into the post that Nolan wrote last night on CharmCityBirdwatch.com. But Vasilios, just going over the game for the Ravens yesterday, another defensive standout performance. It took them a little bit of time to get the offense going, but 4 turnovers for the defense. Chris Moore and Sam Koch just had a hell of a day on special teams. And then there was even some controversial coaching decisions. The decision in the second quarter to go for it on 4th down and not to kick the field goal. I certainly harped on that in my recap last night for Ebony Bird. But just going over the Ravens win now, the 8-6, looking ahead, they have 2 more home games against less than formidable opponents. Where are you at after the game yesterday?
Well, Jake, I just wanted to thank you for having me on. It's a long time coming. I'm just happy to finally be able to join you on this lovely podcast. But anyway, speaking of lovely, the win yesterday against the Browns was far from that. But it was a win. I'll take a win. But my problem with that, you mentioned a standout defensive performance. I mean, it's not that difficult to have a standout defensive performance against a quarterback like DeShone Kizer. Now, DeShone Kizer, he did not look too spectacular yesterday, tossing 2 interceptions, one to Eric Weddle, the other to Brandon Carr, the Brandon Carr that got torched by Antonio Brown last week for 213 yards. It wasn't a really standout performance in my eyes by the defense. It was more of we're waiting for DeShone Kizer to make a mistake so we can capitalize it. They didn't really force anything, in my opinion. I mean, except for the Darius Smith strip sack and Brandon Williams scoring a touchdown. Now, I liked what I saw from Joe Flacco yesterday, switching to the offensive side of the ball a little bit. He looked very spry, if you will. He moving around a lot. He resembles the Joe Flacco from before he tore his ACL. I think this might be the healthiest we've seen Joe Flacco in the last 2 seasons. Now, Joe Flacco running for a touchdown and having a nice strike to tight end Benjamin Watson, who is celebrating his birthday, by the way. Happy birthday, Benjamin Watson. I'm liking what I'm seeing from the Ravens offense, but the defense leaves a lot to be desired, especially after last week's poor showing in which Ben Roethlisberger threw for 500 yards and abused the middle of the field and made C.J. Mosley look like he was 50 years old.
Where were you on that decision in the second quarter? I really harped on this a lot because we've seen very similar situations happen. Like, for example, in the Redskins game last year, they had a 1st and goal situation. They tried the run with Flacco on 1st down, who got absolutely crushed in between really 3 Cleveland defenders on that play. And then you had an attempt to Nick Boyle in the end zone that didn't go good. And then they tried to run 2 separate plays with Alex Collins on 3rd and 4th down. The 3rd down play was an inside run, and the 4th down play was an outside run. Really questionable play calling there. They only had a 3-0 lead at that point, and then they gave the ball back to the Browns, who marched down the field in 5 plays and scored a touchdown and took the lead. I know that decision didn't come back to bite them. They were able to pull ahead, but like I said a couple minutes ago, we've seen in the past, like, for example, the Redskins game last year, where it does come back to haunt them. When they if they do that against teams like the Browns and the Colts, whatever, but if they get into the playoffs and they start making decisions like that against good teams like the Steelers and the Patriots, they might be in a little bit of trouble.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree with you. You took the words right out of my mouth. I think if they did this against a team that had any form of competency at all, I think the outcome would have been severely different. Now, if they were doing it, I think they might have been doing this with attempting to run the ball with Alex Collins for the reason that, well, hey, the Browns are 0-13. We can try this stuff again to see what works, see what doesn't work, maybe so we can see what happens a little bit later on so we don't make the same mistake against a team like the Patriots, like the Steelers, like the Jacksonville Jaguars, or like the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, I think the decision was poor. I think you got to go with Tucker in that situation. Just go with the guy that gave you so many points this season. Go with the guy who's been automatic for you this season. There's absolutely no reason they shouldn't have used Tucker's leg right there. It's just to pull ahead and get another 3 on the board, make it 6-0. And who knows, maybe the Browns don't get a chance that ensuing drive to put 7 on the board.
How about Sam Koch? He punted 3 times yesterday, 5 times. 3 of those punts landed inside the Cleveland 5-yard line, and that led to an interception, a punt, and a strip sack in the end zone by Zadarius Smith and recovered by Brandon Williams, which resulted in a Ravens touchdown. Chris Moore as well, being on the receiving end of a handful of those punts in downing the Browns inside their own 5-yard line. I know that having Justin Tucker is probably the team MVP last year, and then having Sam Koch, who's making a case to be the team MVP this year, might not be all that sexy for football fans because it's the kicker and the punter. But having the Wolfpack and the Ravens special teams unit, it's a very underrated strength to have going into the playoffs.
Absolutely. And, I mean, punters are people, too. You can call it as unsexy as you want to, but Sam Koch is playing out of his mind. He was drafted in 2006. Let's put this into perspective. 11 years later, he's having the best season of his career. It's pretty spectacular to watch. And dating back to the Green Bay Packers game when we really saw how good Sam Koch was this season, when the punt that he kicked should have been down at like the 1-inch line, but the ref, who was out of position, made the wrong call and called it a touchback. And, I mean, Sam Koch has been lights out this year. And going back to Chris Moore he wants to be out there. He is the type of guy that I think loves the game, wants to be out there playing any way he can. I think if he could play defense, he probably would be playing defense as well. But special teams, he is a force, and he is an excellent gunner. And offensively, I was a little bit upset when I saw that he went down with a hip injury in the game against Pittsburgh. But I saw he was back yesterday. He was making his presence felt on special teams. I'm really excited to see how John Harbaugh and Marty Mornhinweg fit Chris Moore into their offensive game plans.
Well, looking at the Ravens' remaining schedule, 2 home games against 2 teams that combined have the same amount of wins as the Ravens do. The first is actually going to be next Saturday, December 23rd at 4:30 p.m. against the 3-11 Indianapolis Colts. And then on New Year's Eve, the Ravens will battle the 5-9 Cincinnati Bengals at 1:00 p.m. Looking at the playoff picture here, the Patriots and the Steelers lead the way at 11-3. We'll get more into the Steelers situation later, but the Patriots now having the number 1 seed. The Jaguars are 10-4 at number 3. The Chiefs are 8-6 at number 4. And then the 2 wild card teams right now are the Titans and the Bills, both at 8-6, and the Ravens and the Chargers are 7-7 in the hunt right now. The Bills still having that tiebreaker spot over the Ravens, but if we look at their schedule right now, they have to play at New England and at Miami, whereas the Ravens play 2 home games against 2 teams that are already out of the playoffs. So as long as the Ravens take care of business at home, I don't really think they need to do too much scoreboard watching. I mean, yeah, they should keep an eye on the Bills, but realistically, the Patriots are still battling for home field advantage as well. They're not going to be resting their starters. Likely a loss for the Bills next Sunday. So if the Ravens just take care of business on Saturday, I actually like the fact that there aren't any other games occurring at the same time on Saturday, because the Ravens can put all of their focus into this game and just focus on winning and then celebrating Christmas Eve and then the holidays with their families.
Oh, for sure. So, I mean, I think the game against the Colts is going to be a good one. I mean, I like what Jacoby Brissett on the Colts side of the ball has been doing. Although he didn't have that great of an outing against the Broncos last week, can you really blame him going against a couple of the best pass rushers and best cover corners in the game in the form of Aqib Talib, Chris Harris, and pass rushing. You got Von Miller right there. And for the Ravens' purposes, if the Titans lose out and the Ravens win out, the Ravens could take the 5 seed in the AFC playoff picture, which is very interesting. And that would mean if the Steelers lock up the 2 seed and the Patriots lock up the 1 seed, which is very possible at this point, the Ravens will travel to Pittsburgh if let's say they make it out of the wild card round. They can make it to the divisional round against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And as we all know, as we witnessed last week, the Ravens play the Pittsburgh Steelers pretty tough in Pittsburgh. So I feel a lot better about that. And I know the Ravens have a solid track record in Foxborough in the playoffs over the last 5 years or so. But I will take my chances going against Pittsburgh Steelers, a division rival, who I believe the Ravens can beat if they just fix the little things on defense. I think the AFC playoff picture is a jumbled mess because, and I had a couple rants about this on Twitter. All these teams that are being, besides the Patriots and Steelers right now, are, I think they're pulling one over on us. The AFC is void of talent for the most part this year, and I think we're not seeing the truth from a lot of these teams. The Kansas City Chiefs, the LA Chargers, the Buffalo Bills, I think these teams have very glaring issues, but because of the lack of talent in the AFC, they all have winning records for the most part. And whereas a lot of these teams, if they were in the NFC with the same records, they would not be even close to getting into the playoffs. The AFC right now is, just like I said, a huge mess. But if the Ravens can somehow pull it off, and I don't know, maybe the Titans lose out, like I said, I would really like to see the Ravens get that 5 seed. And I'm really excited to go to this Colts game this weekend, let me tell you.
Well, if the Ravens want to grab that number 5 seed, one of the teams they will have to defeat is the Cincinnati Bengals. And we did learn over the weekend that longtime head coach Marvin Lewis is going to be stepping down as their head coach after the season, meaning that New Year's Eve game against the Ravens is going to be his last game as the head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals. And really, I think it's amazing that he's lasted this long, going 15 years as a head coach without winning a playoff game for the Bengals. I haven't really heard too much about this. I didn't pay particular attention to the Bengals game yesterday, except when Teddy Bridgewater came back, which was awesome to see. And then he threw an interception, which wasn't really his fault. But all things aside, do you think that Marvin Lewis has a future in coaching, or do you think he's just stepping down and has no plans of coming back, maybe spending more time with his family? Have you heard anything on that?
Well, there's a report out that says Marvin Lewis would be interested in becoming a general manager. So there's always that little tidbit hanging over all of our heads right there. So I don't think we're not seeing the last of Marvin Lewis for the next 2 weeks. But once he steps down from the head coaching job of the Cincinnati Bengals, I don't think we've seen the last of Marvin Lewis. And I know he's getting up there in age. He's been coaching the same team for the last 15 years, like you mentioned. I wouldn't be surprised to see him stay with the organization in some form of consultation role, maybe a front office personnel. I really do think Marvin Lewis is maybe attached to the Cincinnati Bengals at the hip, if you will. I don't know if you can really, because right now you can't really think of Marvin Lewis and the Cincinnati Bengals, or Marvin Lewis without thinking of the Cincinnati Bengals. 2002 was when he went to, or 2003 was when he went to Cincinnati to become the head coach after being the Ravens defensive coordinator for a few years. I was only 7 years old when he became the head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals. I am now 21. So let's be real here. I think he's going to stay with the Bengals, probably in a consultation role.
This is the Charm City Birdwatch podcast, again coming to you through either iTunes or SoundCloud. Check us out on social media at Charm City BW on Twitter, and then CharmCityBirdwatch.com, as well as Facebook and Instagram. We have our reporter and writer Vasilios Nikolaou here, not only for us, but the Legacy Maker Sports Network, as well as a WBAL intern. Again, his Twitter handle is the NFL Guy. He's going to be on the podcast a lot, but this is the first time we're having him on. Lots of crazy finishes in the NFL yesterday. It really seemed, I mean, you had the Aaron Rodgers return at the same time the Ravens played yesterday. And then after the Ravens game ended, just craziness all around the league, whether it was the Jesse James touchdown that was overturned or whether it was Derek Carr on Sunday Night Football diving in for the end zone, and a very similar play that CJ Mosley had last year against the Redskins that he fumbled the ball right as he was going out of bounds. The ball went into the end zone, ruled a touchback. Same exact thing happened to Derek Carr last night, and then it gave the Cowboys, who did have the lead, the ball back with less than a minute left. And then you had, before that, the whole Jesse James play. It looks like this was such a weird play, and the NFL has really screwed this entire catch system up, whether it's Calvin Johnson or Dez Bryant. He caught the ball, and his knee, when he went to the ground, Jesse James's knee was down before he crossed the goal line. But then the reason why they turned it back was because after he extended and made his move into the end zone, the ball wiggled ever so slightly. And I say that because it barely moved, but because he didn't have full control over it, they overturned it. This whole thing is so screwed up. I mean, not only did that, I mean, it had to have happened in a game that's going to determine home field advantage in the playoffs. And as much like I have harped on Steelers fans a lot in the past about complaining about the refs, if the same thing happened to the Ravens, I would be fuming. Don't get me wrong. But let's get something perfectly clear. The referees made the right call in terms of the way the NFL rules currently are. But with that being said, what constitutes a catch and this whole discussion about a football move, it's so silly and it's gotten so out of control. I just don't understand why there isn't more common sense. I mean, if I were to officiate this game, his knee was down at the one. I know that's not how the rules are, but in my book, he should have been spotted down at the 1 yard line where his knee was down, or whether the ball crossed the plane. All this talk about making sure you survive the fall to the ground, it's just it's silly. There's like so much to talk about with all these crazy finishes. I'm really interested in hearing somebody else's opinion from a Baltimore's perspective. So where are you? The Oakland play, the Derek Carr play is more straightforward, but the Jesse James play in particular, what was going through your mind watching this whole situation unfold?
I was watching that yesterday. I was at dinner with some family, and we were watching that exact play as it unfolded, and it was just, I was like, what is even going on right now? And see, nobody knows what a catch is anymore. I don't even think the referees in the NFL know what a catch is anymore. So I don't know. I think okay, I'll say this: they enforced the rule correctly. Now it's a stupid rule, that's for damn sure. And I don't know. I was rooting for the Steelers yesterday because I will give Tom Brady all the credit in the world because I think he is the second greatest quarterback of all time behind Joe Montana. But I dislike the Patriots wholeheartedly, and I was rooting for the Steelers yesterday. But that's besides the fact. The rule was incredibly stupid because that is seriously a catch. That is a catch. Let me use this as an example. Does that mean they're going to stop using jugs machines now at practices for wide receivers to just jump around and catch these passes by the jugs machine? I mean, if you see what's going on with the jugs machine, you have to catch the ball, tuck it, and immediately release it. If you did that in a game, that would be considered an incomplete pass because you have to make a football move, apparently. I think it's incredibly stupid. I think these players are putting their best out there, and Jesse James should have had a touchdown. The fact that the ball made contact with the ground, I get it. It made it a little bit iffy of a call. I don't think it should have been overturned, though. There's absolutely no reason it should have been overturned. He had full control of the ball while going to the ground, and then as soon as the ball broke the plane, that's when the ball bobbled. I don't care if he made a football move or not. That is a catch. He had control, and he made it to the end zone. That should have been a touchdown. And, I mean, the NFL rules can say all that they want. The NFL guys can say everything they want to about the situation. But it's not going to pull one over on all of the fans and all of the professionals out there that call this rule out for what it really is, and it's BS.
You know, I was listening to a clip from Shine on Sports this morning, and who I've called into that show several times. Shout out to Adam Shine. He had Mike Pereira on, who is with Fox Sports, does a lot of officiating, analyzing like all the calls as the broadcasts are going in the studio. And he brought up an interesting point of how just the whole replay system has gone so out of control. He said this probably would never happen, but he brought up the idea of not having replay to specifically review these catches because of how complicated the rules are. And looking at the way the NFL rules are, it doesn't sound like that bad of an idea, like having the referees just make a judge call and not having to go back to replay to reverse such a crucial call like this. But then the problem you have with that is then if they make a judgment call and don't look at replay and then get the call wrong, then you have the exact opposite backlash. So yeah, the NFL is fighting a hard battle, but they have overcomplicated what is and is not a catch. It should just be something as clear-cut as whether or not his knees, like if his knee is down before the ball crosses the plane, he's spotted there. This whole football move, surviving the fall to the ground, it's just gotten way too complicated. And I honestly don't know how the NFL is going to pull themselves out of this, but they really need to revisit this rule. I know we've been talking about it for years, but it's still not clear cut like it should be. And I feel like I'm still seeing calls should be catches that aren't ruled catches. It's a mess. That's the best way to describe it.
Yeah, there are plenty of examples through the past few years. I mean, we can go back to Calvin Johnson, where this rule was pretty much conceived when he caught a touchdown, and then it was called back because he didn't complete the process of the catch. Then we had Lee Evans, who in the playoffs for the Baltimore Ravens had caught a pass in the back of the end zone, but after taking a couple of steps, it was batted out of his hand and ruled an incomplete pass, which led to ultimately the missed Billy Condit field goal that would have sent the game into overtime. Now, then there was the Des Bryant so-called incomplete pass from a couple of years ago, which, again, spurred this theory that you need to complete the process of the catch. I don't know. There's all this proof right now. And then not to mention you have the outcry from social media, from fans, from professionals even, that how incredibly dumb that all of this is. And they're taking the football out of football, it seems. And I mean, it's not just from injury perspective, but from the play perspective. You're not allowed to touch the receivers anymore. You're not allowed to, you have to complete the process of a catch to get anything. It's incredible how intricate the rule book has gotten. I think over the last 10 years, they might have had to add another 300 pages to the rule book just to accommodate everything that's been added.
Well, the unfortunate thing is, like, we've had so many distractions, like, from whether it's been the protest or whether it was Deflategate a couple years ago. And this is not as severe as something like that, but the thing is, that call is going to significantly change the playoff picture. Like I said, the Patriots now have the number one seed in the AFC, and there's only 2 games left in the regular season. Steelers could very well not have another opportunity to take the number one seed, even though they're scheduled. They played Cleveland and Houston next week, while the Patriots play the Bills and the Dolphins to close out the year. But it's just frustrating. It's just like, the way the AFC is shaking out, like, these 2 teams could very well meet in the postseason. And, if the Patriots get the number one seed and if the Steelers get the number 2 seed, you're going to hear a bunch of complaints about how that game just completely changed the outcome. And then if you have the Patriots and Steelers in the AFC Championship and the Patriots end up winning that game, you're still going to have the outroar from Steelers fans. It's just like, can we just have the playoffs, Tom Brady and Ben Roethlisberger, 2 of the all-time greats, just going? I mean, it might not even be the AFC Championship game between the Steelers and the Patriots, but it's just like, can we just play football without having all these off-field distractions or having all these rule distractions? It takes away from the conversation of just having a good football game. It's frustrating. There are a lot of factors right now as to why people aren't tuning into the NFL, but this is just as good of an example as just anything else we've seen. People just they're fed up with it.
Yeah, and I just wanted to drop one more piece of knowledge about the Steelers game before we move on to the next topic. But the whole thing with the Jesse James incomplete pass, afterwards, Ben Roethlisberger was calling a spike, and as we all know, it ended up being a fake spike, and it was an ill-conceived pass to Eli Rogers, which ended up being intercepted by Patriots safety Deron Harmon. That is what I think really determined the outcome of the game, because Roethlisberger should have spiked it and given it to the fourth killer bee, Chris Boswell, to kick it into overtime. Now, I think this falls on the shoulders of Ben Roethlisberger and Mike Tomlin, because there's no way that game should have ended 27-24. It should have ended maybe 30-27 in overtime. Who knows? It should have ended in the tie. Nobody knows for sure. But it should not have ended in regulation. And for the people that say the Jesse James call ruined the Steelers' chances of winning the game, wrong. It should have ended in overtime, and the blame falls on Ben Roethlisberger and his fake spike attempt and Mike Tomlin for allowing that to happen.
Well, while all the craziness of the NFL has been going on, our last topic that we want to dive in with Vasilios here, the Orioles and Manny Machado. Of course, the winter meetings took place last week. Nothing was done as usual. We don't know whether or not the Orioles are going to do their normal wait until February to start making serious moves, act like they care type thing or not. Nevertheless, they left the winter meetings without addressing the starting rotation, which has really been a big topic of the offseason. But while all this is going on, as we all know, the contracts of several Orioles, not just including the players, but Showalter and Dan Duquette as well, several teams inquired about trading for Manny Machado, whose contract is up at the end of the season. There were a couple reports out. Around 12 teams reportedly made trade offers, but the Orioles didn't make a deal. General Manager Dan Duquette at the end of the winter meeting said that the Orioles will continue to listen to trade talks. They're going to think everything over, but nothing is imminent at this point. I just look at this from a realistic standpoint. If the Orioles honestly believe that they have the money, even with the Chris Davis contract, to lock Machado up to $300 or $400 million after the season, then fine, whatever. But if they have no thought of doing that or want to make no effort to do that, and who knows what Duquette and Showalter situations are going to be, then you got to trade him. I know Peter Angelos is not an easy owner to work with. I know that a lot of media pundits have called him one of the hardest owners to work with in the sports, which I don't doubt at all. But he needs to realize that if they aren't going to keep him around, after this season, if they can't afford him, they need to start thinking about the future. And that future is also going to be going into who's filling in the manager and general manager voids. There's so many layers to this story. You talk about how Dan Duquette has, ever since there have been the rumors that he was leaving in 2015, he's kind of been not as aggressive in the market. They haven't allotted any international slots at all. They refuse to spend money internationally. But if he wants to continue being the Orioles general manager, which I highly doubt at this point, or if he wants to continue working in a front office, then he needs to figure out a way to put a trade together to get Machado to another team that makes him look good for other teams that might need a new general manager. What's your take on the whole Machado trade talks that we heard so much about last week?
Well, see, at first I was like, don't trade Manny Machado. If you have to get the money to sign him, sign him. I think he obviously is a difference maker, and he's like I said, obviously a difference maker. He is probably the best defensive third baseman in the league, and apparently a big part of his re-sign deal with the Baltimore Orioles is that he wants to be a shortstop instead of a third baseman. I don't know. I mean, we've seen him play shortstop quite a bit in his time here, just in relief roles for J.J. Hardy and Tim Beckham. And I wasn't that wowed with his play at shortstop. He seems like he has a better skill level at third base. And I don't understand why he wants to make the move so bad. I guess he might like playing the position better, but it looks to me as if he's better at playing third base than he is shortstop. But if they really have to trade him, which I think they're going to end up trading him sooner rather than later. I think he's not in the Orioles uniform before the season starts, or when the season starts. I think he's going to be wearing a different colors. But I really do think the Orioles need to get something out of this, because if they let him walk at the end of next season, say they don't trade him, and they get a pick because he left, it's going to be absolutely ridiculous. And there's no reason to let him walk. You either sign him or you trade him. There's no in between. If they trade him, they need to get a few pitching prospects, or maybe something in a deal to get a possible replacement. There are a lot of things that you can do with Manny Machado, and it seems like the Orioles are not doing any of these things right now, whether it's offering him a new deal, whether it's trying to deal him off to other teams, like you said, and the Orioles have stated they have received multiple offers for Manny Machado. Now it's up to Dan Duquette to put these plans into motion and secure not only his future, but the future of the Baltimore Orioles as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the Machado contract, Adam Jones contracts coming up, Zach Britton and Brad Brock are coming up, along with Showalter and Duquette. 2018 is a crucial year for the entire franchise and the next 10 years for the franchise, quite frankly. And we certainly hope that they start thinking about their future sooner rather than later before it's too late. But time is of the essence. So before we let you go, Vasilios Nikolaou here, writer, reporter for Charm City Birdwatch and the Legacy Maker Sports Network, as well as WBAL intern. Anything you want to plug before I let you go here on the Charm City Birdwatch podcast?
Absolutely. If you guys enjoy sports photography by any means, you guys can go check out my Facebook page called Fourth Down Media. Now, you go to Fourth Down Media, I take photos for the Washington Redskins when I get the chance. I also have started taking photos of the Maryland Terrapins men's basketball team. It's a really cool experience, and if you guys look for any pictures that you like, you can feel free to use them. Just contact me before you do, because they're all watermarked. I'd be happy to send you watermark-free copies of said photo. But go ahead and check that out. I put a lot of time and work into that when I do it for the people that enjoy looking at all those things. And Jake, I appreciate you having me on today, pal.
Again, he is a writer and reporter for Charm City Birdwatch and the Legacy Maker Sports Network, as well as WBAL intern Vasilios Nikolaou, again, the NFL guy on Twitter. You can find me at JMcDonnell95, as well as Charm City BW, our official Twitter handle for CharmCityBirdwatch.com, as well on Facebook and Instagram as Charm City Birdwatch. We are coming to you crystal clear through either iTunes or SoundCloud. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast on either of those two outlets and give us that big 5-star review. I'll talk to you next time on the Charm City Birdwatch podcast. Again, for Vasilios, I'm Jake McDonnell. Like I said, check out those short videos that I had. Again, I did a free game balls video on the Ravens yesterday. That's on my Twitter, and I'll be sharing that throughout the week as well as plenty of other content coming as we approach the holiday season. So, hope everybody, all of our fans, the Charm City Birdwatch, have a great week. And as we approach the holiday season, certainly enjoy the time getting ready for that. Certainly one of my favorite times of the year. So until next time, I'm Jake McDonnell. We'll talk to you later on the Charm City Birdwatch podcast.